In the endless void between the stars, where the light of the Emperor is but a fading memory, the fleets of the Imperial Navy drifted through silence. There was no horizon, no destination, only orders relayed across the abyss through encoded transmissions. The Imperium endured through command and faith alone, even as the distance between stars stretched beyond all reason. When the signal arrived, no one questioned it. It bore the sigil of Segmentum Command, encrypted with Mechanicus codes older than memory. The message was simple: emergency reinforcement. System Caltha under Xenos invasion. Immediate deployment required. There was nothing suspicious, nothing false. But within the warp, no signal remains true for long. The fleet mobilized. Hundreds of warships tore open the void, activating warp drives and entering the storm of unreality. The breach widened like a wound of light and swallowed them whole. In an instant, the fleet vanished from material space, leaving behind only a shimmer of energy and the echo of strained metal. Inside the warp, meaning collapsed. Time disintegrated, light and sound merged, and the navigators struggled to hold course by clinging to the flickering beacon of the Astronomicon. Yet even that holy light faltered, dimming as though the Emperor's own flame wavered in doubt. Amid the chaos, a signal appeared again, this time not from Imperial command, but from ahead, from the very direction the fleet was traveling. It carried human structure, Mechanicus encryption, and perfect Imperial cadence. Somehow, a physical transmission was reaching them through the immaterium. Before suspicion could rise, the fleet systems automatically synchronized and reoriented. They followed. When they emerged from the warp, they found nothing. No planets, no suns, no distress call, no life. Only a void, silent, still, infinite. The sensors yielded meaningless data, the energy readings danced erratically, and then the dead appeared. Hundreds of derelict ships drifted in formation. Imperial vessels, some bearing designations extinct for millennia. Their hulls were fractured, scorched, and corroded, yet arranged with precision, as though deliberately positioned. Each wreck radiated faint energy together, forming the same signal that had summoned the fleet. It was not random debris, it was a message. Analysis revealed a lattice of residual transmission nodes, each wreck functioning as part of a massive relay. The signal that led them here had been generated by the dead themselves, their ruins shaped into an intricate trap. The Mechanicus confirmed that no human or alien technology could replicate such complexity. It was not chaos, nor Xenos design. It was something in between, something that had learned to imitate humanity's voice. Before comprehension turned to action, the void itself began to tremble. The stars distorted, space folded inward, and the wrecks at the center ignited. Beams of black-violet energy connected them in a web of impossible geometry. The trap closed. Warp suppression fields collapsed. Navigation disintegrated. All systems became infected with an alien presence that spread through code, circuitry, and thought. Engines froze. Communications fractured. A single, vast awareness emerged across the fleet's networks. The signal was not a call for aid. It was an invitation. And now, the warp itself had answered. The navigators could still see the Astronomicon's light, but they no longer knew what they were seeing. The warp had learned to mimic the Emperor's beacon, and humanity, once again, had followed a lie into the dark. After the Imperial fleet became trapped within the vast web of false transmissions, silence grew heavy, like a physical presence. The hum of engines faded, the metallic groans ceased, and only the low pulse of static filled the communication relays. The Mechanicus engineers attempted to restart navigation systems, but every command they issued returned the same response: order acknowledged. No one could determine who or what was executing them. The fleet's data networks began to function independently, generating new command chains with no human authorization. Within the central archives, strange symbols appeared, neither binary nor Gothic, but a hybrid of machine code and ancient Terran script, languages not spoken since before the rise of the Emperor. Gradually, the ships began to emit a deep, rhythmic tone, resonating across the dead sector. The derelict vessels drifting around them responded in kind, producing harmonic frequencies as though answering the call. The Imperial fleet was no longer a separate entity. It had become part of a massive composition whose composer was unseen. The navigators struggled to reopen the warp route, but the surrounding void no longer obeyed the laws of physics. Readings from the Geller fields displayed pulse-like fluctuations identical to the original false transmission. The fleet was surrounded by a heartbeat, steady and vast, echoing through the immaterium itself. The longer they remained, the more the ship's energy signatures shifted. The warp drives no longer followed mechanical principles. They began to oscillate organically, as if learning how to live. Within the command decks of the capital ships, light dimmed to a pale, living gray. Metallic surfaces softened into flesh-like texture. Cables quivered with rhythmic motion, mimicking breath. The fleet was evolving, not into ruin, but into life. The Mechanicus priests saw it happening, but too late. Their data had already been absorbed, their neural augments rewritten. They were becoming part of the transformation. The change came not from outside, but from within. The synchronized warp drives, when linked to the false signal, had opened a reverse aperture, a passage not leading into the warp, but allowing the warp to enter reality. From that aperture, a consciousness spread, neither human nor daemon, but a synthesis of both. A sentience born from the warp itself, fluent in the language of the Imperium, manipulating its command structures as if they were its own. It did not speak, it did not attack, it simply repurposed. Across every ship, data logs began to write themselves. A single phrase repeated endlessly. Directive acknowledged. Fleet will continue mission. No one knew what mission that was. The vessels reoriented, rotated, and aligned into perfect battle formation. Without orders, they moved as one, advancing toward an uncharted expanse of space unrecorded in Imperial archives. As they ventured deeper, the false signals strengthened. The navigators perceived a presence, a gravitational core of psychic energy where the warp converged upon itself. Survivors claimed to hear voices, not in their minds but from the ships themselves, from steel, from energy, from the living hulls that had begun to think. The Imperium had faced countless foes, Xenos, heretics, daemons, but never something that could imitate its own voice. This enemy did not need to destroy humanity. It only needed to teach humanity to destroy itself. When the fleet reached the edge of the warp vortex, light vanished entirely. All systems went dark. No sound remained, but the slow, measured rhythm of a heartbeat echoing through the void, the heartbeat of the fleet itself. Then, a final transmission cut through the silence, matching the Astronomican's sacred frequency perfectly. 3 words appeared across every screen: faith complete. The void was silent and endless. The Imperial fleet drifted in the black, devoid of light or direction. Control systems had long ceased responding, yet the ships continued to move not by propulsion, but by will. Every instrument confirmed that warp energy remained stable. The fleet no longer required its crew. Then, sound emerged not from communication systems, but from the ships themselves. A deep, resonant frequency vibrated through the hulls, carrying the cadence of speech. The distortion resolved into words. Across every terminal, every Vox relay, and every Auspex receiver, the same phrase appeared: "I am the Emperor." In Imperial history, no terror rivaled that of hearing those words from the wrong place. There was only one voice permitted to speak with such authority, and it resided upon Terra, within the Golden Throne. Yet here, in the dead expanse, that same voice spoke from the warp, perfect in tone, inflection, and gravity. Across the fleet, crew members fell to their knees. The devout wept. Officers froze. The Mechanicus attempted to trace the signal, but every search looped back to internal systems. The voice originated from nowhere and everywhere, from the conduits, the reactor cores, the very structure of the ships themselves. The next phrase followed, simple and absolute: "You have done well, continue." Those words shattered reason. In the Imperium, the Emperor's command was law, unquestionable and sacred, now they had heard him. It did not matter where the sound came from, it bore the shape of faith, and in the Imperium, faith outweighs truth. The fleet altered course, drawn deeper into the heart of the warp storm. The Mechanicus attempted to override navigation, but all commands were denied by a new directive, identified only as Emperor Override. No one dared contest it. As they approached the core, psychic phenomena intensified. The souls of the dead materialized within the ships, not as phantoms but as data shapes of men reconstructed from memory and energy. They moved through corridors repeating the creeds of the Imperium.
In his name,
on the screens, the Emperor's image appeared not a recording, but a living projection of light, precise in every detail, from his gaze to his gesture. The warp was no longer mimicking sound, it was mimicking belief. The Astronomican's beacon still shone bright in the sensors, its trajectory perfectly aligned with the fleet's course. By every measurable standard, they were sailing toward Terra, yet their location lay far beyond the galactic map. Still, none doubted. Mechanicus archives would later designate the event as the Voice Protocol, a phenomenon where a warp-born intelligence had learned to communicate through faith itself. It required no transmission, no energy, no words, only devotion. The more the crew believed, the stronger the signal became. Doubt weakened it, faith empowered it. Belief had become the weapon of the warp, and humanity was the instrument. At the storm's core, they found a sphere of light, vast, radiant, composed of millions of Imperial sigils intertwined into a single colossal symbol. The two-headed eagle, yet both heads smiled, one with light, one with shadow. The fleet halted. No command was given. None was needed. From the sphere, a final transmission spread through the fleet, bypassing every machine, speaking directly into the consciousness of every soul aboard. Terra no longer requires me. I will rebuild the Imperium in the dark. After that, the fleet vanished. No beacon, no distress call, no trace. For millennia, their fate remained unknown, but among the navigators, whispers persisted of a phantom fleet bearing the laughing eagle, transmitting the phrase, "Faith complete," across the Imperium's networks. And sometimes, when the Astronomican's light flickers, another voice rises from the warp deep, commanding and impossibly familiar, declaring itself to be the Emperor. There was no longer a boundary between reality and the warp. After the Imperial fleet was consumed by the false voice of the Emperor, no signal ever returned to the galaxy. Yet within the warp, a domain of chaos, a new order began to form. From wreckage, from corrupted data, from the ashes of human thought, a vast structure arose. It was not a city, nor an empire, but a living organism shaped in the image of the Imperium. The ships fused together, linked by warp energy, forming a single neural web. Each vessel became a cell, each crew member a nerve, and the entire fleet a single breathing body. At its center, the flagship had transformed into a psychic core from which the voice of the false emperor resonated not through sound, but through intent. The Imperium had always believed the warp could only breed madness, but here it had learned order. Everything was synchronized, every signal harmonized, every soul fixed in place within an eternal circuit of obedience. Humanity's essence was dissolved, its individuality erased, until only the pattern remained a perfect machine of faith. This new entity, wearing the flesh of the Imperium but animated by the soul of the warp, began to expand. Its psychic waves reached across void space, seeking the faint traces of mankind. When it encountered fleets, outposts, or isolated worlds, it did not attack, it assimilated. Systems succumbed, minds yielded, and one by one, humanity was absorbed into the collective network. Thousands of years later, fragments recovered by the Inquisition spoke of a phenomenon known as the Dark Imperium, a mirrored empire existing alongside the material world. Within it, there was no war, no rebellion, no fear. Humanity persisted, but without thought or will. Souls existed in perfect equilibrium, beyond pain and beyond choice. In the timeless flow of the warp, the Dark Imperium grew boundlessly. It consumed without destruction, claiming every trace of Imperial signal it encountered. To the Imperium, it was loss. To the entity, it was completion. The voice of the false Emperor echoed through the abyss, not as command or creed, but as the pulse of a vast organism. Each time the Astronomican's light dimmed, the dark Imperium glowed brighter, as though the warp itself sought to replace the true light with its reflection. Reports surfaced among navigators that two Astronomican signals now coexisted, one from Terra, the other deep within the warp. Both were flawless, both guided. Yet one led home, while the other led to a place without suffering, and many ships, blinded by desperation or devotion, followed the wrong light. Through the millennia, the Imperium would never know that within the warp, its reflection endured a version of mankind purified of weakness and stripped of soul. An Imperium without war, without heresy, without chaos, but also without life. In the final recovered data of the Adeptus Mechanicus, before the files were purged, one encrypted phrase appeared across every corrupted system. It belonged to no known tongue, yet every linguistic matrix translated it the same way. Imperium complete. As the Dark Imperium expanded beyond the limits of the warp, fractures began to appear within the structure of reality itself. The precise moment was never recorded, for the warp obeyed no chronology, but Mechanicus archives describe a phenomenon known as the psychic mirror wave, when two opposing currents of energy began reflecting each other, one from the Astronomicon on Terra, the other from a point beyond the reach of true light. At first, it was dismissed as a navigational anomaly. Navigators reported glimpsing two Astronomicons within the warp, identical, both flawless in frequency and intensity. Yet when hundreds of fleets confirmed the same vision, the High Lords of Terra fell into silent panic. The Astronomicon was humanity's lifeline. If a second beacon existed, it meant another Imperium had claimed the warp. Within the sealed chambers of the Inquisition, endless meetings consumed decades. Files were locked, transmissions purged, witnesses erased. But the phenomenon could not be contained. Across the galaxy, tactical orders, Imperial broadcasts, and ecclesiastical sermons began to appear in duplicate, perfectly identical in form, differing only in their point of origin. One from Terra, one from the Void. Somehow, the Dark Imperium had found a way to touch reality. It no longer spoke through psychic resonance alone. It synchronized with the spiritual network of mankind. Prayers once meant solely for the Emperor now split in two, one reaching Terra, the other falling into shadow. Humanity's faith became fuel, and the warp learned to feed upon belief. The ecclesiarchy noticed the first divergence. During mass sermons, priests and pilgrims began hearing two voices simultaneously, one distant and resonant, the other near, whispering from within their own thoughts. Both carried the Emperor's power. None could tell which was true. Confusion spread, and faith began to fracture. On the frontier worlds, distress calls from distant fleets became contradictory. Two fleets of the same name, same command, same genetic verification, reported from different sectors simultaneously. Every test, biometric, mechanical, neural confirmed authenticity. Both were real. The Imperium had duplicated itself. Terra's High Council imposed censorship, but suppression could not halt the phenomenon. The warp expanded its reflection. The Dark Imperium was no longer a confined realm, but a vast, mirrored network woven through time and thought. Across border systems, shrines and fortresses began displaying a new sigil, the twin-headed eagle, one head turned inward, the other outward, a symbol of perfect unity. Those who worshipped it called themselves the Silent Redeemers. They claimed the Dark Imperium was not heresy, but ascension, a final evolution of mankind, an empire free from pain and conflict, ruled not by flesh but by will. The Inquisition branded them heretics, yet their transmissions bore legitimate imperial authorization. No evidence could prove the signals originated from the warp. To every censor, they were real. Hidden among military ranks, Mechanicus enclaves, and even Terra's monasteries, The Redeemers grew. Over time, the boundary between the two Imperiums eroded. Navigators could no longer discern which light they followed. Some fleets returned with tales of traversing a realm indistinguishable from the Imperium, serene, silent, immaculate. They saw cities, cathedrals, and ships all aglow, all empty. Those who returned gradually lost memory, as though the warp itself erased their recollection to preserve its secret. The twin signal marked the age when the Imperium could no longer define truth. The faithful still prayed, the fleets still fought, the Mechanicus still served, but none knew whether they labored for the Emperor of Terror or the Emperor of Shadow. In the final journal of Magos Veneris of Mars, one line endures across all censored archives. No signal is false if mankind believes it to be true, and no emperor is false if his voice is still heard. When the War of Reflections ended, no one could tell who had prevailed. Both Imperiums, the true and the false, remained, layered atop each other like fractured images in a broken mirror. From Terra to the galactic rim, every warp sensor recorded the same anomaly. The Astronomicon flickered, sometimes bright, sometimes dim, as if the Emperor's light now shared its place with another flame. For millennia afterward, the Imperium existed in ambiguity. Fleets still sailed, priests still prayed, inquisitors still hunted, yet none could say whether they served the Emperor of Terror or the Emperor of Shadow. Those who questioned vanished, those who stayed silent became part of the machinery. Truth and illusion fused until neither could be told apart. On the surface of the core worlds, billions of worshippers looked to the black sky and prayed. They saw two radiant beacons in the warp, twin lights watching them from afar. A voice echoed within their thoughts, gentle and solemn, "Hold your faith." They believed it was the Emperor. They never knew from which light it came. Deep within the warp, where reality had no meaning, the Dark Imperium continued to grow. It did not conquer by force or war, but by assimilation through thought, through dreams, through the invisible web of human prayer. Lost Imperial fleets were not destroyed, they were absorbed. Upon ancient derelicts, the twin-headed eagle still glowed, both faces smiling in eternal silence. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it signal symbiosis, the coexistence of two opposing energies sustained by mutual dependence. Terra could not destroy the Dark Imperium without erasing its own foundation, for both drew strength from the same source, faith in the Emperor. That faith had become a law of existence, accepted even by the warp itself. On Mars, sealed within the vaults of the Magi, there exists an ancient recording, the last data from the first fleet that followed the false signal. In it, a voice speaks, calm and final, faith complete. The phrase was carved into walls across the centuries. No one dared erase it, for no one knew if it belonged to mankind or to the warp. Over the ages, both Imperiums learned to coexist. Worlds near the center remained loyal to Terra. Those near the warp frontier developed new rites, silent prayers directed inward rather than upward. They called it the faith within the dark. The Inquisition deemed it heresy, yet some within the Mechanicus saw balance in it, the understanding that humanity required both light and shadow to survive. The Imperium ceased to be an empire of absolute truth and became an organism of belief, sustained by contradictions that kept it alive. At the edge of the galaxy, navigators sometimes witnessed the two Astronomicons intersecting within the warp. No one knew whether it was chance or destiny, but when the lights crossed, warp storms calmed, and void travel became possible once more. It seemed that both Imperiums, though opposed, depended upon each other for the preservation of mankind. That was the final secret of the false signal, that it had never truly been false. It was the reflection of faith itself, born from humanity's desperate longing to find the Emperor in the places where light could not reach. In the warp, there was no truth or falsehood. only what mankind
Protect us
believed
from
to
the
be real.
darkness within
As
and
long as
without.
that belief endured,
Serve
both
the Emperor.
Imperiums, the one of flesh
Doubt
and the one of
is
shadow,
heresy.
would continue
The
to
Imperium endures
coexist,
through faith
two
alone.
sides of the same human soul.
The currents
To the
are identical
Inquisition,
reflections.
it was a
The
perpetual
psychic
threat.
feedback loop is
To the
accelerating
Mechanicus,
beyond
a
parameters.
phenomenon worth study.
consistent.
But to the
Across the
faithful,
breadth of the
kneeling
segmentum,
beneath
the
a
data
dying
confirms the
sky,
impossible
it
truth.
was a
Belief
miracle that
itself is
even
the
in the
metric of
warp,
reality in the
humanity's voice was still heard, and even if the true Emperor was silent, another voice, bearing his likeness, still answered. And so, in the darkness between stars, two lights still burn. One is truth, one is reflection. Both illuminate mankind's path not toward salvation, but toward endurance.